Hey everyone, and welcome back. You ever just look at a rupee and think like, huh, I wonder where this came from?
Yeah.
Well, today we are going to be diving deep on something that might actually really surprise you.
Okay.
It's about how the Reserve Bank of India, the RBI,
Hmm.
how they make money.
Okay.
And yeah, you heard that right. The institution in charge of like keeping our economy stable is, well, they're making bank.
Interesting.
Yeah, they pulled in an incredible 2.20 lakh crores in profit just last year alone.
Wow.
That is a lot of rupees.
Yeah, that is.
So how does a central bank, technically a not-for-profit entity, how
Yeah.
do they generate that much cash?
Yeah, how do they?
Well, let's find out.
Okay, so it's honestly more interesting than you might think. One way is something called seigniorage.
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 Okay.
It sounds really complicated, but when you break it down, it's a pretty simple concept.
All right, I'm ready. Break it down.
Okay, imagine this. You walk into a coffee shop, right?
Okay.
You buy a latte, maybe it costs 150.
Right.
Coffee beans, the milk, the cup. That probably only costs the shop around 20. So the rest,
Yeah.
the 130 difference, that's their profit.
Makes sense. Yeah.
So seigniorage is kind of like that. The RBI prints the rupee notes that we all use,
Right.
the paper, the ink, all that. It costs pretty low, like a 10 note. Costs like what, 0.50 to print?
Really?
Yeah, and when the RBI sells those notes to banks at face value, so here euros, the difference is profit.
So they're making 9.50 profit on every 10 note.
Pretty much, yeah.
That adds up pretty fast.
Yeah, that does.
But I'm guessing there's got to be more than just printing money, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Printing money is not their only source of income.
Yeah.
Another major revenue stream comes from dealings in the foreign exchange market.
Forex trading. That sounds more like, I don't know, Wall Street, not RBI.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's really a crucial part of what they do.
Okay.
So the RBI manages India's foreign exchange reserves, which is basically holdings in different currencies like US dollars, euros, and others. They buy and sell these currencies strategically, based on the market changes. Just last year, they made 1 lakh crore from this.
Wow.
Just from that.
So they're like expert currency traders on top of everything else.
Yeah, you could say that. Their expertise in this area is really important to keep the Indian rupee stable and manage India's financial standing on like a global level.
So we got the profits from printing, we got the Forex trading. What else is there?
Well, like any financial institution, they get interest income, lending money to banks for daily operations, investing in government bonds.
Okay.
Both of these generate interest payments for them.
So they're kind of acting like a giant bank themselves.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And get this, the RBI, because they're government-owned, don't have to pay income tax.
Wait, no income tax?
No income tax.
That's amazing.
All those profits for seigniorage, the Forex trading, all the interest income, theirs to keep.
So what do they do with all that profit? Surely they don't just hoard all this cash, right?
No. They're very responsible.
Okay.
A big portion goes to what they call a contingency fund.
A contingency fund, what is that?
So basically, it's a safety net for the Indian economy.
Okay.
Think of it as like a giant savings account for the unexpected. Natural disasters, financial crises, even pandemics.
Gotcha.
Last year, FY23, they put aside 1.3 lakh crores into this fund.
So they're really serious about keeping India's finances, like, stable.
Absolutely.
That's good to know. But what about the rest of the money? They can't just keep saving it all forever.
Of course not. So the rest of the profit, which was, a still very cool euro 87,000 crore in FY23, that gets transferred to the Indian government as a dividend.
Okay.
It's like the RBI's contribution to the country's treasure chest, right?
Yeah.
Helps fund infrastructure, social programs, even defense.
So the RBI's profits are, like, benefiting every citizen in India.
Absolutely.
It's wild how a central bank focused on stability can also help fund the country's growth.
Yeah.
But thinking about it, they could probably print way more money and make even more profit. But that would probably cause some problems, right?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And that's where things get really interesting because there's this balance. They have to balance making money and keeping the economy stable. If the RBI just printed money like crazy, we'd have hyperinflation, and that would be a disaster.
Yeah, too much money, not enough goods.
Yeah.
Prices go through the roof and your savings are worth nothing.
Exactly. So even though the RBI can print money, they have to be really careful. They have to think long term. Their priority is price stability, economic growth, and making sure the rupee holds its value.
So it's like a dance.
It is. It is a dance.
They need to make money, but they also need to be really careful not to, I don't know, mess things up by printing too much.
It's a delicate balance.
It really is.
And that's what makes the RBI's role so crucial.
Yeah.
They're like the guardians of India's financial system, walking that tightrope between, profit and stability.
This is really interesting stuff. So we learned how the RBI gets revenue through seigniorage, the forex trading,
Yeah.
and all that interest income.
Yeah.
But then we also saw how they take care of those profits to keep the economy safe and sound, and also how they give back to the national treasury.
Right.
But there's one more piece we need to look at.
Yeah.
It's the relationship between the RBI and the government.
Right.
That's a complex thing. It's a topic that people debate a lot.
Yeah.
And it's super important for the future of India's economy.
Very important.
But we're going to dive into that in part 2 of this deep dive.
Sounds good. It's actually pretty fascinating how all these RBI operations, they're complex, but they really do affect people like you and me.
Yeah, for sure. We've talked about seigniorage, we talked about forex trading, but I'm kind of curious about the actual process. Like, how does the RBI actually print millions of rupees? Do they have like these giant printing presses hidden somewhere?
Well, they do have printing presses, but they're not exactly hidden.
Oh, okay.
They're in 4 different cities across India.
Wow.
And yeah, they're like these super secure facilities, like state-of-the-art technology and all.
So it's like a money factory?
Pretty much, yeah.
What about the forex trading? Are there like traders just glued to their screens like in those Wall Street movies?
Uh-huh.
What?
It's not too far off, actually.
Okay.
So the RBI has this dedicated team, they're experts, and they monitor the global currency markets, like 247.
Wow.
They use sophisticated algorithms and trading strategies to, analyze the trends and decide when to buy or sell.
Sounds intense.
Yeah.
But how does all of this actually affect the average person?
Okay, so the RBI's decisions have a big impact on the whole economy,
Right.
like a ripple effect. Their actions can influence interest rates, inflation, even like how easy it is to get credit.
Okay.
For example, if the RBI lowers interest rates, it becomes cheaper for banks to borrow money, which then could lead to lower interest rates on loans for people and businesses.
So the RBI can like actually make it easier for people to get loans.
Yeah, like to buy a house or start a business.
Okay.
Exactly. But then on the other hand, if inflation starts rising, the RBI might increase interest rates.
To like cool down the economy.
Yeah, to cool things down, but that might also make borrowing more expensive. So it's all about finding the right balance.
They're like conducting a giant financial orchestra trying to make sure all the instruments are playing together nicely.
Yeah, I like that analogy.
Thanks.
And speaking of harmony, let's go back to that relationship between the RBI and the government.
Yeah.
Like we said, it's a tricky balance between the RBI needing independence to make, smart economic decisions and the government's need for revenue and sometimes influence.
Yeah. It's that potential conflict of interest we talked about earlier. It's
Yeah.
tricky for sure. So how does the RBI actually stay independent when, ultimately they answer to the government?
Well, it's something that's been debated for a long time.
Mm.
The RBI has a certain level of autonomy. It's actually by law. So this lets them operate without direct interference from, politics. But then the government does appoint the RBI governor, and they can kind of influence policy through their people on the RBI board.
So there are checks and balances, but it's still a bit of a gray area.
It is. It really is about finding the right balance.
Okay.
Too much interference from the government,
Mm.
and that could undermine the RBI's, credibility,
Yeah.
and it could hurt their effectiveness in managing the economy. But then total independence with no accountability could also be a problem.
Right. So what are like the downsides of the government having too much power over the RBI?
Okay, so just imagine, it's election time.
Okay.
The government wants to boost the economy,
Right.
get those votes.
Mm-hmm.
So they pressure the RBI to keep interest rates super low, even if it's not the best thing for the economy long term.
So it's like giving into a sugar rush, you're going to crash later.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important that the RBI stays independent.
Right.
They need to make decisions that make sense economically, not politically.
Have there been times when the government and the RBI just disagree?
Oh, yeah, definitely. There have been times where there's been friction, yeah.
Okay.
But ultimately, they do have to work together.
Right.
They both want the same thing, a strong, stable Indian economy.
So it's more like a healthy debate than a like power struggle?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Okay.
It's important to have that open dialogue, be willing to compromise.
Mm-hmm.
Transparency is really key.
Right.
The more the RBI communicates its decisions and why they made them, the more trust people will have in their ability to, make those independent choices.
Yeah, transparency is important in any relationship, especially when you're dealing with something as big as a nation's economy.
Exactly.
So it sounds like finding the right balance between independence and accountability, that's key for the RBI to be effective.
Yeah, it's a process.
Hmm.
They have to evolve and adapt. India's economy is growing. It's becoming more connected to the global system, so the RBI's role is going to keep changing too.
It's kind of mind-blowing to think about all the work that happens behind the scenes to keep our economy running.
Yeah, it really is. And it's something that affects all of us every day.
Yeah.
From the price of groceries to interest rates on loans, it's all connected to the RBI.
Well, this deep dive has really opened my eyes to the world of central banking, and the RBI's role is just, it's so important. But I have to admit, I'm still a little worried about that potential conflict of interest between the government and the RBI.
Hmm.
Is there anything that can be done to, like, reduce that risk?
That's a really great question, and it leads us right into a crucial part of how the RBI works. It's a topic that causes a lot of debate and raises questions about, like, who really has the power when it comes to making economic policy. But we'll dive deeper into that in part 3 of our deep dive.
All right, so we talked about how the RBI makes a ton of profit
Right.
and how they need to balance that with keeping the economy stable, which is a tricky thing.
It is.
And we also touched on how their relationship with the government is, well, kind of complicated. Yeah.
But how do we address this elephant in the room,
Mm-hmm.
the potential conflict of interest,
Right.
the government going in a big part of the RBI's profits and maybe using that to influence decisions? How can we make sure the RBI is really acting in the best interest of the economy, not just following some political agenda?
Well, it's a very valid concern. Experts have been trying to figure this out for years. There's no easy fix, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But there are a few key things that could help reduce that risk.
Okay, I'm listening.
Yeah.
What can we do to make sure the RBI is making decisions based on, economic data, not political pressure?
One big one is making the RBI's autonomy, like their independence, stronger.
Okay.
That means making sure the leaders are appointed in a way that's transparent and independent,
Yeah.
so they're shielded from that political influence.
Okay, so like a system where the governor and those key decision makers, they're not just political appointees, they're chosen because they're experts.
Mm.
Exactly. It's about making sure the people at the top are driven by economic principles, not politics. And another important thing is more transparency and accountability.
Yeah, sunlight's the best disinfectant, right?
Exactly.
The more the RBI is open about their decisions, the less chance there is for things to go wrong.
Exactly. Things like publishing detailed reports on their monetary policy decisions, their economic forecasts.
Mm.
Even the reasoning behind those big profit transfers to the government, that can really help build public trust and make the RBI more accountable for their actions.
So keeping the public in the loop and showing them that the RBI is acting responsibly,
Right.
independently.
Absolutely. When people are informed, they're empowered.
Right.
When they understand what the RBI is doing and why they're doing it, they're more likely to hold both the RBI and the government accountable.
That makes sense. But isn't there a risk of being too transparent?
Oh, of course.
Like, wouldn't that hurt the RBI's ability to do their job effectively in the market?
You're right. There needs to be a balance.
Yeah.
There are going to be some sensitive market operations that need to stay confidential.
Right.
But those big policy decisions, how they use those profits, transparency should be the rule, not the exception.
So find that middle ground, keep the public informed, but also let the RBI do their job. But even with more transparency, more autonomy, can we really get rid of that political influence completely?
It's a tough one.
The government benefits from how well the RBI is doing financially.
Right. It's a challenge for sure. But by strengthening those safeguards we talked about, making sure there's open communication and promoting that culture of transparency and accountability, we can create a system where the RBI can actually fulfill its mandate, keeping that economic stability even when there's political pressure.
Sounds like it's a process of continuous improvement.
Exactly. It takes vigilance, commitment, and everyone, the RBI, the government, the public, they all need to understand that having a strong and independent central bank is vital for India's economy in the long run.
This deep dive has been really eye-opening. We went from those rupees in our wallets to the complex world of central banking.
It's a pretty big world.
And we learned about how the RBI makes those profits, how they have to balance that with keeping things stable, and how crucial it is that they stay independent.
Yeah, it's a lot.
We learned the RBI isn't just some, faceless organization. It's a powerful force that affects all of us.
For sure.
And understanding how it all works is really important for anyone who wants to talk about the economy and, hold those in power accountable.
Absolutely. So next time you're holding a rupee, think about it. It's not just a piece of paper. It represents a really complex and interesting system. And that system needs us to be vigilant to make sure it stays transparent and independent. That's how it can truly serve the Indian people.
And on that note, that wraps up our deep dive into the RBI and their finances. We hope you learned some cool stuff, and maybe you'll even explore the world of economics and finance a bit more on your own. Until next time, keep those brains buzzing and stay curious.